Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to the ESG meeting for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program, October 21st, 2024. My name is Anita Yap, and I am the facilitator. So we'll roll into the next slide, please. So we're providing closed caption in English and Spanish. English closed captions are available within the Zoom and YouTube. Users can follow this link to view both Spanish and English captions in a separate browser. So go to that link. Next slide. So we will have public input. So this is some instructions for providing that to the ESG. So there's going to be an opportunity to provide brief public input to the ESG later in the meeting today. So if you're looking to provide public comment on the draft supplemental environmental impact statement, please visit this link here, www.interstatebridge.org draft SEIS, for ways to submit official public comment. So to submit input after the meeting, you may email comments to info@interstatebridge.org with ESG public comment in the subject line. You also can call 888-503-6735 and state ESG public comment in your message. So just note that there's going to be 2 public comment periods. So if you want to comment on the draft supplemental environmental impact statement, you will need and want it included in that. Please make sure you do that via the link that we show here. You can also comment later to the ESG later in the meeting, and we'll provide those instructions later. Okay, next slide. So we have some meeting ground rules. Here we are. Thank you. As your new facilitator, I'm just going to go over these and offer some suggestions as well. So the meeting ground rules that you're familiar with are: honor the agenda, listen to understand and ask questions to clarify, hard on problems, soft on people, address interests and seek common ground, provide a balance of speaking time. So I also want to offer that as your new facilitator to keep this meeting rolling along on time. I may have to ask to interrupt you to move along, but I think you all have been at this for a long enough time that you understand that. We do know that there's going to be some public comment as well near the end of the meeting, so we want to make sure we have time for that as well. Thank you. Next slide. So our meeting agenda we'll have a round of introductions and updates, and then a program update, some discussion about the draft SEIS and public comment opportunities, and then a report from the Community Benefits Advisory Group. Public comment will be around 11:10 to 11:25, and then we'll wrap up at 11:25 for next steps. So next slide, we're going to do some introductions. So if we can go to full screen so folks can do their introductions and updates. So I think we'll start with our local elected officials. So I'd like to offer Mayor Ann from the City of Vancouver, if you would like to provide an update.
Good morning, Ann McInerney-Ogle, Mayor for the City of Vancouver. First of all, fantastic news about the release of the draft supplemental. We so appreciate all of our partners at the federal, state, and local levels. And we know that you're continuing to collaborate with all of us to reach that final EIS, both for the program's needs and for our community's needs and desires. We're anxious to continue listening to everyone about what are some of those adverse impacts that we want to avoid. But we know that the entire group is working to achieve kind of that whole package for safety, economic growth, resilience that supports not only our climate and equity goals, but everyone else's, which is not an easy task. So thank you, and we're looking forward to that continued collaboration. Nice job, Jeff and everyone else. Greg, you can do this. Good luck. We're right there with you.
Thanks, Marianne. Next, we'll go to Portland City Commissioner Mingus Maps.
Just good morning, everybody. Mingus Maps, Portland City Council. I know we got a packed agenda, and frankly, I couldn't say it any better than Mayor Ann, so I'll just say ditto, and glad to be here today.
Thank you, Commissioner Maps. We'll go next to Metro Council President Lynn Peterson.
Hi, all. It's Lynn coming to you from the Conference on Transit and Community Building in Philadelphia, Impact. So apologies. I just want to say thank you, ditto to also what Mayor Ann said, and just also a quick plug for the update of the 50-year vision at Metro. We are kicking that off with the Future Vision Committee, which is required by our charter to start this conversation, and encourage you all to apply. We're looking for people to be on that, and projects like this are an important part of our future. It doesn't get any easier from here, folks. So looking forward to having a lot of good discussion about how we want to grow and where we want to grow. Thanks, Anita.
Thanks, Lynn. Next, we'd like to introduce Washington State Department of Transportation Secretary, Secretary Roger Millar.
Good morning, everyone. No updates. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you, Roger. Next, Director of ODOT, Chris Strickler.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see folks. And I just wanted to add one thing, which is a congratulations to all of our local partners around the table as well. We are in, I think, the next major phase of this program, and the publication is a huge milestone. So congratulations to the project team. But I know that doesn't happen without all the effort and support from our local partners as well. So appreciate all of your help and support. Congratulations yet again, and I look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Strickler. Next, I'd like to go TriMet General Manager, Sam Dessou.
Well, thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm Sam Dessou, TriMet's General Manager, and Mayor Ann said it best, so I'm not going to elaborate anymore. So look forward to this morning's conversation.
Thank you, Sam. Let's see, we have Port of Portland Executive Director, Curtis Romanel.
Hey, good morning, everybody. No updates.
Okay. Port of Vancouver, Juliana.
Good morning, Juliana Marler, CEO with the Port of Vancouver. I'll echo the sentiments that everyone has shared so far. The one update I would like to share is we did have our ribbon cutting for the new 366,000 square foot office building down at the Terminal 1 waterfront has been developed by Lincoln Property Company, bringing several thousands of jobs down to the waterfront and hopefully a lot more. So very exciting times, and I think everyone is looking forward to a new bridge to support that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliana. Next, Leanne Carver, Chief Executive Officer of CTRAN.
Good morning, I'm Leanne Carver, CEO of CTRAN, and as no updates for CTRAN side, and as the mayor had put it, we are having nothing more to elaborate on that, so thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. Looks like, Jack, are you standing in for Matt Ransom with RTC?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And I want to echo the same thing that Ann said. Great job getting this out. Also really appreciate Greg coming before our board a couple of weeks ago. We had some technical challenges that made it interesting, but he did a great job, answered a number of questions, and I believe the board is much better informed now. So thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Let's see. It doesn't look like we may have representation from the Community Advisory Group, either Lynn or Ed. So I think we'll move on to program updates. Greg?
All right, if we can pull the slide deck up, and welcome everyone, and thank you for all the kind words. So this is a great team effort. So staff members from all of the partner agencies have been right there with us trying to make this thing happen. So great work. So let's go to the next slide, please. And I do want to give an update for my friend Curtis Robinhold at the Port of Portland. I've flown in and out of the new refurbished PDX, and it is outstanding. So you're too modest to take credit, but that is one world-class upgrade of PDX.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate that.
So let's talk about where we are at. Since our last meeting, we have secured a $1.5 billion Federal Highway Administration Bridge Investment Program grant. So we had the Federal Highway Administrator, Shaylin Batt, come out and make the announcement. And just as he was doing so, the bridge lifted. So serendipitous that they got a chance to see, but we had Senators Murray and Cantwell, as well as Representative Gluesenkamp-Perez. And we know that the Oregon delegation was sorry that they could not be there, but we had a lot of commitments and this was kind of a last minute thing. So, but we've also this summer had a visit from the FTA administrator, Veronica Vanterpool. She was down for the Better Red opening, which is another milestone for this region. The Better Red by TriMet. So this was fantastic time to give her a tour of the bridge and get her up to speed on all the things that we're trying to accomplish. So she was took the walk over the bridge and went up to the machine house. So it was a very good visit. We also just recently participated in a roundtable with Representative Larson, who sits on the Congressional Transportation Committee, along with Representative Gluesenkamp-Perez. And very good conversation about where the program is at and the hurdles that we have remaining to achieve. So let's go to the next slide, please. So I'm not going to read all of these things, but the purpose of this slide is to show you that even though we are in the draft SEIS public hearing, public comment period, we have not slowed down on our presentations that we are doing throughout the community. We are still engaging very, very closely with a number of stakeholders to this program to make sure that they are aware where the program is at. So once again, we are talking to and giving bridge area tours. The advisory groups are still going very strong and meeting to understand and get word back to their parts of the community that they can impact to make sure everyone knows what's going on with the program. So the presentations are still going fast and furious. We have one later today, as well as having our equity advisory group meeting later today. So you can see that the team is not slowed down with the engagement that we're doing overall. We're still tabling at fairs and festivals, and we'll continue to do so throughout the life of this program to keep folks up to date. Even when we get into construction, it's going to be important to have those conversations and let folks know where things are at. So let's go to the next slide. So just recently, we had the joint transportation commissions for each state met in our office to have conversation about their overall transportation issues in each state. But it also brought the subcommittee who's looking at tolling for the I-5 bridge, had a convened afterwards to present to those commissions the things that they are studying. So they put forward a number of scenarios that will be studied in the level 3 investment toll and traffic revenue study. So they're looking at rates ranging from $1.55 to $4.70 per trip. They're looking at truck toll rate multipliers ranging from 1.5 to 4 times the automobile rate. They're also looking at low-income tolling programs, and we understand that that is important on each side of the bridge. And they are also looking at the issue of exemptions. So once again, this is not the final toll rates or policies, but this gives several scenarios and details how much dollars that they think can be raised as they study this in that level 3 traffic study. So let's go to the next slide, please. So we also have another process that's ongoing within our program, and that's for Section 106 historic properties. So this is also a requirement that the program must meet, and it is a requirement of the National Historic Preservation Act. So our team is going through that. We have opened the 106 comment period. It runs separately from the draft supplemental public comment period, but it's opened on October 18th, and it will close on the same day that the draft supplemental public comment period closes, November 18th. So that we have been making sure that we are reaching out to folks detailing the impacts on historic properties in this corridor within our footprint. So next slide, please. And with that, I will take any questions before we take a dive into the draft supplemental document. So if there's any questions from any of the ESG members.
Feel free to just unmute yourself if you have a question.
So Anita, seeing none from my end, why don't we turn it over to Chris Regan and start walking through what's in that draft supplemental document.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Chris Regan, Environmental Manager for Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. I'm here with my colleagues. As Greg said, there's been a lot of activity. We're very excited. Thank you so much for the congratulations of where we are right now with releasing the draft supplemental. We're going to walk through the conversation that we've been having with the community, let you know first a general overview of what IBR is doing. Then we'll talk a little bit about the findings and specific topic areas and the message that we're bringing to the public about how they can comment. So as we get to the different sections, my colleagues will introduce themselves, respectively as well. So we've had this conversation before, but as a good background here, the information that we are studying within our draft supplemental EIS is not starting from scratch. The environmental document has started from the I-5 Columbia River project or crossing project that first went through a draft EIS in 2008. During that period, we scoped the document, looked at the alternatives that would address purpose and need, and we rejected some alternatives and brought 4 alternatives forward to manage against to measure against a no-build alternative. We accepted comments on that, and in 2011, the Columbia River Crossing issued a final environmental impact statement, and a 2011 record of decision was issued by Federal Highways Administration, Federal Transit Administration. The 2011 record of decision arrived at a locally preferred alternative. When IBR picked the program back up, we asked our federal agencies, how to proceed with the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program, and recognized that because the needs had not changed within the program area, we would continue the work of CRC, but we needed to do a supplemental analysis that included modifications made to address changes for the physical environment, community priorities, and regulations. And so early conversations with our executive steering group defined a modified locally preferred alternative that included improving active transportation facilities and connections through the program area, extending light rail transit from Expo to Evergreen Boulevard, plus also extending bus on shoulder through the program area. We are going to add 3 new light rail transit stations, replacing bridges over the Columbia River and North Portland Harbor. We are modifying 7 interchanges within the 5-mile stretch within the program area. And we are going to focus on 3 through lanes and at least 1 auxiliary lane in each direction, and applying variable rate tolling for motorists using the river crossing as a demand management as well as a financing tool. Within that modified locally preferred alternative, we also identified a number of design options to study to provide some contrast and help understand trade-offs in decisions. So for the bridge configuration, we looked at 3 types: a movable span, a single level bridge movable span, a single level fixed span bridge, and a stacked bridge. We also looked at with or without C Street ramps in downtown Vancouver, to and from I-5, inclusion of 1 or 2 auxiliary lanes, possible park and ride locations at the waterfront in Vancouver and at Evergreen Transit Station, and then also talked about shifting the I-5 alignment, either have it centered where I-5 is currently or shifted west between SR14 and Mill Plain. Again, comparing, contrasting impacts to historic, the National Park, historic Fort Vancouver versus impacts to downtown Vancouver. All of those options are compared against a no-build alternative, which means none of the improvements of the modified locally preferred alternative advance, but that does not mean that independent actions independent of IBR would not proceed. So there's kind of clear recognition that something has to be done. If IBR wasn't done, those tasks would continue to move forward. It's important to recognize that the analysis within the NEPA document is conducted for future conditions. We've picked the year 2045 for the draft supplemental. So as we're talking about comparing and contrasting it against the no build, it is looking at the year 2045. Next slide, please. We've also created a number of visualizations that are now out on our website, and this is to help people understand their concerns, their interests. And a lot of the work that we're doing in our public meetings is to ensure that as the public is picking up the document, we help them understand what what are the issues that they're focused, that they want to focus on, to provide comments, and then helping them provide those comments. So one of the things is this fly-through visualization, and I think somebody can click on that and we can walk through a demonstration of what this looks like. Yeah, I don't think I have access to it, so I don't, hopefully we're pulling that up.
Hold on, I'm trying to get it up for us right now.
Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah.
While we're waiting, does anyone have any questions for Chris?
The background. There's probably going to be a lot more questions in the findings, and I just need to get through this to get to that.
Chris, while we're waiting, you want to describe kind of what these visualizations are as just like have people, since you're—
Yeah, sure. So again, the intention of these videos is to help our community members better visualize potential investments that are being studied. So there's a number of them that are on our program website, on the modified locally preferred LPA page, and also on YouTube. And they show the fly-through visualizations of the investments and the different design options that are being studied throughout the program area. So it's one example, and we started. one example of videos available. You can see here where we've got a direction compass at the bottom right, showing folks that we're going north on I-5, starting in Portland. You've got the names of the different streets so that people can help understand where they're at. The videos, show single level bridge configuration with steel girder bridges, one auxiliary lane, and the C Street ramps included. Different going over Portland Harbor here, the different connections to Hayden Island, along with the main I-5 east-west connections on Hayden Island underneath I-5. Going over the main crossing of the Columbia River. And it's important to note that the videos are based on the same information shown on the program investment role maps that we're showing at the different public hearings. But it's just that additional tool showing them a different way to help understand what's being studied here. So there's nothing new in these fly-throughs that aren't within the draft environmental impact statement or are provided in other areas. You've got the community connector there at Evergreen. Right. Thanks, Lauren. And as we pull up the next slide, so the next task I've got here is to help kind of frame discussion of our findings. And so there are three technical areas that are being evaluated within the draft supplemental environmental impact statement: transportation related, community related, and environment related. Said my colleagues are going to walk through some of these. Transportation includes transportation, air quality, greenhouse gas, navigation, noise. Community looks at cultural resources, economics, environmental justice, equity, neighborhoods, land use, property acquisitions. Environment jumps into climate change, water quality, and wetland and impacts to waters of the state. So with that, this is where we're going to jump in and talk a little bit about findings. So I think I hand it over to you, Ryan. Ryan and Paige.
It's good. Thanks, Chris. Good morning. Ryan LaProuse, IBR Transportation Lead, and Paige Schloop, the IBR Administrative Assistant, will assist me with some of the transportation slides. So I'm going to start off with covering big picture here. So compared to the no-build alternative, the modified LPA is expected to benefit transportation in 2045 by reducing crashes, better accommodate the expected increase in people moving through the corridor while reducing the number of vehicles on the road, improving access to public transit, providing safer and more accessible crossings for people who bike, walk, and roll, and decreasing travel times and reducing the number of hours of congestion experienced on the bridge. Next slide. So next I'm going to go into some specific findings that are kind of transportation related that are from the draft supplemental environmental impact statement. We're going to have information on each of these slides, and then on the bottom of each of them kind of shows where in the document you can find more information. So in 2045, the no-build alternative is forecasting increase crashes 28% over existing conditions. The modified LPA with one auxiliary lane or with two auxiliary lanes, the design option, as Chris kind of went through earlier, kind of showing you there's design options, will reduce crashes between 13 and 17% compared to the no-build due to the geometric changes and the interchange improvements, the auxiliary lanes, CD roadways, lane widths, and full shoulders planned as part of the program. Next slide. Next, I'm going to cover average daily person throughput. This graphic shows the people crossing on the I-5 Columbia River bridges by mode, including vehicles, freight, transit, and active transportation. The daily person throughput across the I-5 bridge is forecast to increase 30% in the 2045 no build compared to the 2019 existing conditions. The modified LPA with one auxiliary lane or two auxiliary lanes will increase person throughput by almost 4% in 2045, while reducing vehicle miles traveled and the number of vehicles using I-5. So each of these columns kind of shows by vehicles or freight or transit or active transportation what crosses that river at the I-5 bridge under existing conditions, the no build, and then the modified LPA or design options, and then the bottom row there sums it all up for you. So the increase in daily person throughput with the modified LPA and options compared to the no build is due to the increase in transit, active transportation facilities, as well as the variable rate tolling as planned as part of the program. Next slide. Next, I'm going to go into vehicles. How many vehicles are crossing the I-5 Columbia River Bridge? So under the existing conditions in 2019, we had 143,000 average weekday vehicle trips crossing the bridge. This is planned and forecast to increase by about 26% in the 2045 no build, out to about 180,000. And then the modified LPA with 1 aux or 2 aux will reduce that by about 3% due to the investment in high capacity transit throughout the program area, including LRT extension, as Chris kind of identified, the express bus on shoulder, the new park and ride lots, the variable rate tolls that are planned to be implemented, and the improved active transportation facilities. Next slide. Next, I'm going to cover travel times for vehicles. So this is talking about a specific origin destination pair. So this is starting at the I-5, I-205 interchange near Salmon Creek, and ending at the I-5, I-405 interchange in North Portland during the weekday peak periods. So peak period and off-peak period travel times will decrease compared to the no build. The critical periods are shown here. So the southbound AM is the critical peak for the morning in the southbound direction. That's the one on the show on the left in the bar chart. And then the graphic on the right is showing the critical PM peak, the northbound kind of travel time pairs. So the decrease in travel time under the modified LPA options is attributable to the IBR program improvements and components, including the aux lanes, the collector distributor roadways, the interchange, and freeway improvements that kind of Chris showed on the fly-through, as well as the transit improvements and the variable rate tolling. So let's talk about the travel times here shown. So the southbound AM travel time shown there on the left is 58 minutes in the no build condition. It reduces about 4 minutes or 7% with the modified LPA with 1 auxiliary lane, and then another 4 minutes or 8 minutes in total compared to the no build, for about a 14% comparison with the modified LPA with 2 auxiliary lanes. There will still be bottlenecks on I-5 south of the program area, so that's kind of dampening the improvement in travel times for the modified LPA and the modified LPA with 2 auxiliary lanes. Looking at the northbound travel times in the right kind of graphic there, the no build travel time is 42 minutes for that origin destination pair. It reduces almost 40% to about 26 minutes with the modified LPA with 1 auxiliary lane. It reduces 67% to 14 minutes with the modified LPA with 2 auxiliary lanes compared to the no build alternative. Next slide. Next, I'm going to talk about the hours of daily congestion on the I-5 Columbia River bridges. The number of hours in a weekday that congestion speeds under 45 miles an hour is expected to occur is summarized on this graphic here. So as you can see, we have the no build, the modified LPA 1 auxiliary lane, and the modified LPA 2 auxiliary lanes. So let's start talking about the no build. So the southbound congestion at the bridge in the no build is forecast to last 16 hours, starting at 5 a.m. and going all the way till 9 p.m. And then the northbound congestion is forecast to be 14 hours, starting at 7 a.m. and going all the way till 9 p.m. In the southbound direction, the bottleneck of the Columbia River bridges would improve under the modified LPA and the design option compared to the no build, improving southbound traffic flows. Southbound daily congestion is forecast to decrease from 16 hours to about 4.5 to 4.75 hours with the modified LPA 1 aux or modified LPA 2 auxiliary lane design options, opening up the midday and off-peak periods for travel, especially for freight. So in the next one, let's talk about the northbound. So in the northbound direction, last thing. So in the northbound direction, the bottleneck of the Columbia River Bridge, as I mentioned, would be about 14 hours with the no build. So with the improvements with the 1 auxiliary lane and the 2 auxiliary lane, it'll improve to 9 hours or 6 hours in congestion. With the 1 auxiliary lane, the northbound congestion will still back up to about the I-5 or I-405 split with the modified LPA with 1 auxiliary lane. But there's significant improvement with the 2 auxiliary lane. It reduces it to 6 hours compared to the 14 hours of the no build. But the congestion extent is only back to about Marine Drive. So again, similar to southbound, it's improving the flows in the off-peak period for travel, as especially important to freight. Next, I'm going to pass it off to Paige Schloop, who's going to talk about the kind of some of the transit findings that are in the document.
Good morning. I'm Paige Schloop, one of the assistant program administrators here at the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. Here to talk about transit total travel times. So key things about these travel times that we're seeing is that they are assuming the journey is from downtown Vancouver at Evergreen Boulevard, south or north, vice versa, to downtown Portland at Pioneer Square. It also has the assumption of 10 minutes of travel time. That's, whether you have to walk up to a quarter mile to your station, or you get there a few minutes before your bus, just assuming there's some time involved with that. On the left, we have three graphs here. On the left, the one in orange shows the express bus southbound in the morning. And that in the no-build scenario is 48 minutes. And in the MLPA with one auxiliary lane or two auxiliary lane is 59 minutes. So you might ask, why is that more time in the future? And part of the program will be relieving congestion at the bridge area, but we can't fix everything everywhere all at once. And so just south of us at the intersection of I-5 and I-405, that bottleneck will continue to grow in the future years. And looking at the graph in the middle, the black one, in the no build scenario, northbound express bus travel time will be 67 minutes, with the 45 minutes with the one auxiliary lane in the modified locally preferred alternative, and 33 minutes with two auxiliary lanes. So overall, that express bus round trip will be 10 to 20% faster than it is now, but again, still impacted by traffic beyond upstream or downstream of where we're traveling. On the far right, the green graph shows the light rail travel times in both directions. Again, that's 10 minutes of travel time included in that. So when you see 47 minutes for travel time, it's really 37 minutes on that train. It does not include a no build scenario because there is no train now, and it has its own dedicated right of way. So whether or not there are auxiliary lanes does not impact the light rail travel times. And next slide. And this talks about transit ridership. So the increase in transit riders on the new I-5 corridor, that's bus and rail, is about 14,800 riders with a no-build alternative, and that bumps up to 29,100 transit riders with the MLPA. And that's folks choosing to take transportation because of tolls or for whatever reason, but ultimately that's 14,300 less people on the road driving in vehicles that are choosing transportation instead. And the average weekday passenger miles is 69.5 thousand in a no build scenario and 213,000 in the MLPA. So in the case of ridership, it's almost twice as many riders as the current ridership. And in vehicle miles, it's almost 3 times as many people will be putting up miles on light rail as opposed to the roadway. And that's it. Thanks.
Good morning. I'm Ray Mabey, Assistant Administrator. Assistant Administrator Green will be joining me for this. We thought he'd be out on jury duty, but he wasn't selected, so he gets to join us this morning. Next slide, please. So one of the areas in the community technical portion is navigation, and there are benefits, impacts, as well as some neutral changes that the LPA results show in the draft supplemental. But regardless of bridge configuration, the modified LPA is expected to impact and benefit marine navigation in a few ways. It will reduce the number of in-water piers. The replacement bridge has much longer spans than existing, with 400-foot long spans. So reduced number of piers, increased horizontal navigation clearance to that 400 feet span difference. And then also it'll shows to improve navigation through movements in the navigation channel and reduces vessel directional changes as they transit to the Columbia River bridges and the BNSF railroad bridge. And lastly, it increases seismic resiliency by reducing the risk of bridge failure or collapse by a modern seismically resilient bridge. And this is included because if a bridge doesn't have seismic resiliency and we do have a earthquake event that's large enough, it could see subsidence and be a hazard to navigation in the river due to collapse. Next slide, please. This graphic shows the different options being studied in the draft, and this takes a bit of explanation. So first I'll walk through what you're seeing here. This shows the double deck, the fixed span, single level fixed span option, the single level movable span option as well. So the very top line you see there is the top of the double deck fixed span, which would show the level of traffic on the top of that very top double decker. And then underneath, the next solid line, which is overridden with a dashed line, is the lower deck where transit and bikes and peds would be in the double deck fixed option. Now, this is not to scale, but somewhere in that same range, you have the single level fixed option, all modes on one level, very close to that same lower level of the double deck fixed option. Both of these options provide 116 feet clear from zero CRD on the river. The next dashed line down that's kind of flat shows the single level movable span, which is just a bit lower. It would provide a vertical clearance of between 90 and 100 feet, but when in the closed position, but 178 feet in the open position, which is the same as a current lift span. Now, we've heard some feedback from some public meetings around the new replacement or options that we have here would be steep and dangerous. So just a comparison, the maximum grade on the existing bridge is 5%. The maximum grade on the double deck fixed span would be actually lower at 4%. And then the single level fixed span, as well as the single level movable span, their maximum grades would be 3%. So each of these options that were being proposed is less than the existing span. Next slide, please. So the draft supplemental environmental impact statement describes the permanent and temporary property acquisitions and displacements that are required to conduct the work proposed. The modified facilities that are described in there include adjusting and widening the highway, new or widened local streets, the new light rail alignment, transit station and parking rides, as well as new bike and pedestrian facilities and pathways. All of these could require property acquisitions. In the modified LPA shows that we could displace 43 residential units with an additional 33 residential units with the I-5 Western shift design option. And also looking at 36 businesses displaced with an additional 3 businesses if that westward shift affecting would occur. And that would affect up to 616 employees. In space, the construction and long-term operation and maintenance of the modified LPA, including all the design options, would permanently acquire about 47 acres of area of property, including 4.3 acres in permanent easements. So that gives you an idea of the space. Next slide, please. So the program understands the impacts this has on people and businesses. Excuse me. Take some water. And how it affects people in the real way, whether where they live or conduct their work. So that's not lost on us. And as projects do by the DOTs, we're doing everything feasible and will do everything feasible to avoid and minimize the potential impacts to property. And it's important to know and remind ourselves that at this stage, there have been no final decisions about what's going to be built. And we have many steps remaining to continue to refine and minimize and avoid impacts, which is why we have a supplement out for comment. We can take those comments and find ways to adjust. The program, as we've talked in other venues, is right now tentatively comprised of 28 different packages that will be sequenced over time. And so as we approach those, we won't be purchasing property well before they're needed. We'll be purchasing them as those needs arise. We want to make sure we preserve the opportunity to continue to avoid and minimize where we can as we approach those different elements of the program. And if it is determined that we need to acquire property, we will be doing appraisals backed by independent analysis to make sure that we are providing fair market value. And following the Uniform Act, that requires that we contact property owners early and often, and continue to provide an open door, especially for those ones that we don't see that we need right now, but need in the future. Make sure that we're continually discussing and open and share with them the progress of the program. And so lastly, the program will continue to find ways to avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts through the whole thing, but through the whole program. But avoid minimizing property impacts is of paramount interest to us as we move to construction. I think Frank Green picks up the next slide.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Frank Green, Assistant Program Administrator. Wanted to cover a little bit of what the draft supplemental EIS covered or analyzed as far as economics. As had been said previously with some of the transportation slides, we do see a benefit to the kind of the economic activity within the region through improved freight mobility and access to economic opportunities for all demographics due to improved travel times, whether using the freeway or the extended transit options. But we do also see some potential impacts to economic activity, as shown on this slide. We potentially see some reduction in property tax revenue because of some of the displacements that Ray just walked through. And as Ray said, with some of the businesses who are potentially displaced, some of those jobs may need to be displaced with them. Several of the design options that we analyzed, including the westward shift and some of the waterfront park and ride stations, could also have some additional displacement with for businesses, with some additional employees being potentially impacted there. We also analyzed that with one of the design options, which was the C Street removal, that some of the local businesses near Mill Plain saw some increased delay for access because of some increased travel time and more traffic on Mill Plain. But we also analyzed that during construction, this program will have economic benefits to the region. There will be increased employment throughout the region here as we're constructing this program. And for every $1 billion spent in construction, I think similar to what we've said before, we expect that there be about 5,500 direct jobs. That would be the people who are actually doing the construction activities, as well as up to almost 11,000 indirect jobs. The indirect jobs include suppliers of the material, as well as businesses in and around the program area that may see added benefit to some of those direct construction users using those businesses. Next slide. One of the other aspects that we've analyzed is environmental justice. This is a requirement with the federal process to identify what are the benefits or impacts on minority or low-income populations within the program area. And so some of the impacts and benefits to EJ populations are very similar to all the general the general populations. Those include, as I kind of just previously mentioned, increased access to high capacity transit, active transportation, and reduced vehicle travel times. That also will provide an increased access to jobs with the faster travel times. We do see improved air quality within the corridor, but we will also see some increased traffic and noise impacts during construction. Now, some of the impacts that wouldn't necessarily be similar for the general population that are directly for the EJ populations within the program are, costs associated with the tolling. As I had previously mentioned, or as Ray had mentioned, the one of the design options, the westward shift, does show additional impact to residential and business in an environmental justice identified area. And the program through construction may have some potential impacts to cultural resources within the program footprint. Next slide. So along with the requirements of the environmental justice analysis, I know as we've spoken several times with this group, we want to include in center equity. So the program in the draft supplemental EIS also analyzed what are the potential benefits or impacts to not just the minority and low income, but also expanded that to include the disability community, those who may experience houselessness, some limited English proficiency, as well as young and old members of the community, and saw very similar impacts and potential benefits to those shown on the EJ slide previously. So we do show that with the different design options, that travel time to destinations such as job access or just where they're going will be benefited with this program compared to no build. So whether you're using a car, active transportation, or the high capacity transit options that we'll have, people will be able to get to where they're trying to get to at a faster rate than with the no build. As said before, there are some potential residential displacements and potentially impacting people, some of those individuals in our community who are experiencing houselessness. Tolling, once again, for this equity analysis, could be a potential impact to members within this analysis. And some of the construction related impacts with these equity priority communities, such as, during construction with traffic diversion, noise, dust, etc., may be there as well. So obviously that'll be something that as we develop construction plans, we'll be doing everything we can to avoid or minimize some of those potential impacts during construction. So with that, I think we go to the next slide and I turn it back over to Chris Regan, who will go through some additional environmental.
Thanks, Frank. Appreciate it. Yeah, so I'm going to wrap up the discussion on findings, talk a little bit about messages around accessing the draft supplemental. So start with cultural resources, and just to reinforce as what Greg said, our section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act comment period just opened today. We've got great information on IBR's webpage talking about that. And that's open from October 18th, last Friday, till November 18th. Also within the draft supplemental, we do talk about cultural resources as well. As Ryan suggested, chapter at the bottom, if you're interested in this, we'll get you to the information you're looking for. Our summary of potential effects to archaeological resources within our area of potential effect, or APE, includes 12 of 15 previously recorded archaeological sites are located within the modified locally preferred alternative. And those sites have the potential to be impacted by construction-related physical ground disturbances. Along with that, there are adverse impacts to historic built environment as well. 3 properties in Oregon, 7 in Washington, and 2 specific interstate properties. The chapter walks through efforts to avoid, minimize, and mitigate as well. Next slide. We also identify chapter on climate change and the efforts of IBR to work with our partners to ensure that we're focused on local, regional, state, and federal goals on creating the climate future we're looking for. So the modified locally preferred alternative analyzes a no build 2045 that defines increased mode share using low and zero emission modes, transit and active transportation within the program, also changes in fleet and national standards for cars and energy usage. And with that reality, there's a lower energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions in 2045. And that relates to, with no build, there will be approximately 11,440 metric tons of carbon dioxide exhaust that are produced per day from roadway operations. And with a modified locally preferred alternative, again, using transit and active transportation, we reduce that by about 31 metric tons per day. That ends up being about 14,000 metric tons a year. Also within the draft supplemental chapter on climate change, we talk about improvements in climate resilience using different materials, low carbon materials, and specific design to ensure, again, we're ready for our climate future. Next slide, please. In water quality, one of the biggest benefits of the program is currently our program area does not have stormwater treatment. This program will bring stormwater treatment to I-5 throughout the program area. And that includes treating 190 acres of stormwater currently that is not treated before it runs into the Columbia River. So we've got plans for all of the facilities and infrastructure necessary to make sure we capture tie-ins and those kind of things and treat it before it goes into the Columbia River. Next slide. And then the message around ensuring that individuals have access to the draft supplemental. The document is available and it's accessible by all community members. Our staff have worked hard getting the message out, providing information to ensure that individuals, our public, can focus on those things that they're most interested in and move through as quickly as possible. We ensured that it adheres to ADA standards, which means if people use programs to work through the information, this is compatible with those programs. We have an online search function to locate specific information. You can plug in a keyword you're looking for, interest, and it'll help lead you through the document. We've also translated our executive summary into multiple languages, and we have translators standing by if more information is needed or requested. Individuals can view the draft supplemental, executive summary, and technical reports online at interstatebridge.org/draft SEIS. It's really hard to miss if you go out to our webpage. There's also a number of hard copies available for in-person review. We have one at the IBR office on 500 Broadway in Vancouver. There's two others in Vancouver, one at the Vancouver City Hall, one at Vancouver Community Library. And then there are two in Portland as well, one at the Charles Jordan Community Center and the other at the Portland Building on 5th Avenue. Our program, our staff have set up office hours. If there's questions, if there's anything that we can do to assist in clarifying questions and help people make sure that they can access the process to comment, individuals can sign up for online using the links in our office hours event page at interstatebridge.org/calendar. Next slide. And specifically, in order to make sure that comments are recorded and captured as part of our administrative record, something that is moving forward within our National Environmental Policy Act, individuals can comment through November 18th. They can submit a web-based form at the link there. They can submit an email, sending that email a comment to draftseis@interstatebridge.org. They can send a comment to the IBR office through the mail if you want to put a stamp on something and send it in. Our address is 500 Broadway, Suite 200, Vancouver. You can also call the IBR office, leaving a verbal comment at 866-IBR-SEIS or 427-7347. You can comment at virtual and in-person public hearings. And again, we've had a number of those. We have a couple more virtual hearings coming up. Comments can be provided in your native language. And again, we will translate that for the record. And again, there are 2 upcoming virtual public hearings. The draft supplemental virtual public hearing will be, first one is on October 26th at noon. And the next one is October 30th at 6. Again, we're trying to do everything we can to make sure that these hearings are accessible by people with different needs. And I think with that, we've made it through, and this is probably the place to stop, Anita, if there's any questions on our findings.
It looks like we have a question from someone in the attendee. RTC web meetings, you have your hand up. Go ahead if you want to unmute yourself.
Yes, good morning. Matt Ransom, RTC Executive Director. I apologize to.
We can't hear you. Well, I can't hear you if you're speaking. So if you can turn your sound up. And identify yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Matt. Okay.
Yeah, I apologize to the group for being late. It's been fun to listen behind the scenes. Great report. A question for Chris. So the process as a co-sponsor, I understand, is very prescriptive. The law lays out certain things that you must analyze. So embedded within that is you have certain questions that you have to respond to in this type of environmental assessment. How much room might there be for somebody out there that believes they're impacted or believes there's an effect that you didn't analyze? Is there an opportunity for people to bring forward questions that haven't been assessed? And what does it look like, if that's possible, then for a response, or recognizing that you can't evaluate everything, like maybe navigate as we try to promote commentary and input on this, how people might engage in the process outside of the prescriptive things that you've put forth in the documentation.
Yeah, Matt, great question. Thank you. Thank you for asking that. Trying to get through all the material, kind of some things fall out. So the goal of our comment period with the National Environmental Policy Act is to ensure that the focus of the program addresses the needs. And so if there are questions or comments about how we did our analysis, how we focused on alternatives, the specifics around mitigation that might be better to avoid or minimize impacts, all of those comments are valid and are valuable in assessing this modified locally preferred alternative that is laid forth in the draft supplemental EIS. And so if individuals have comments on feeling that we didn't focus on the right solution, or a change in, hey, you need to study specific aspects of impacts, or hey, I think we need to mitigate or do something else to minimize harm, we want to see those comments, and this is the time to do that. And so yeah, thanks again, Matt, for really appreciate the question. I'll fill in a little bit more. So in the process there, again, is when we receive those comments, the NEPA process requires that all comments be responded to, and that we show the public how we've addressed those comments. And that's what the final environmental impact statement's for. So all comments that are received will be answered. We'll show how it changed or refined the program, and those comments will be set forth in the final before the federal agencies make their record of decision. I can keep stalling, Anita.
Any other questions, anybody? Or we move on? Looks like we're good, Chris. So we'll move on to the Community Benefits Advisory Group update with Shannon and Emily.
Thank you so much. I'm Shannon Singleton. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Community Benefits Lead for IBR. So we're going to share just a little bit of an overview, and then Emily will run through the benefits, the recommended benefits that came out of the Community Benefits Advisory Group. And this is really our opportunity to gather input from you all as ESG members on this first category. Next slide, please. So the community benefits work has been couched within the IBR equity framework. So as a reminder, it's looking at those top equity objectives around mobility and accessibility, the physical design, community benefit, workforce equity and economic opportunity, the decision-making process, as well as avoiding further harm. Next slide, please. We've been thinking about community benefits in these 4 buckets. So we have plans and mitigations that may already be included. We have partner conditions that have come from some of you all. Then we have partner agency contributions, as well as additional benefits that may be identified by the CBAG and the community at large. Next slide, please. So the community benefits process started with a brainstorm phase. Just last month, we started to move into reviewing and refining those potential benefits. To give some context, we had over 140 in the brainstorm. We're down to about 50 as we look at combining and really workshopping their recommendations. They will move into a phase where they're using modified consensus decision-making, and they'll move into recommendations here shortly. In between these phases, we're working with an interdisciplinary team that includes design, environment, procurement, climate, finance, our DBE, and workforce outreach teams, the agreements team, as well as our tribal liaison. And as you all remember, we conducted some asset mapping with you all as program partners and some additional interested parties. Next slide. With this, I'll hand it over to Emily to run through our first tranche of recommendations.
Thank you, Shannon. Good morning, everyone. I'm Emily Thomas Peralta, and I am also part of the Community Benefits Advisory Group team. And so I'm going to take you through the first batch or tranche of recommendations that the CBAG voted to move forward using their modified consensus decision-making model. And so we'll run through these in each of the categories. The first category is mobility and accessibility. So these were to connect to transit service improvements, create bicycle amenities such as repair kiosks, create pedestrian safety measures such as speed bumps and signs, provide adequate bicycle signage and enhance wayfinding both during construction and after the program for safety enhancement in local communities, use universal design and be radically inclusive, create accessible trails and networks with lighting for safety, balanced with considerations for ecosystem health. The program will explore accessibility needs with people with disabilities and groups serving them, as well as non-car using groups. Next slide, please. Continuing in this category, we have create efficient public transit to key locations, integrating design elements to improve user experience. Design active transportation facilities to create a comfortable, low-stress experience, prioritizing the safety of vulnerable users and providing convenient access from the local network to new facilities. Consideration for cost analysis for financial and feasible implementation. Design team to communicate and follow up with the group about the design choices and the rationale behind it. Next slide, please. So now in the category of physical design, we have create designs that prioritize the preservation and enhancement of natural features, focusing on the views from both and towards the bridge, while working within the constraints of the bridge structure to maintain structural integrity and safety. This will include viewpoints or designated areas for cyclists and pedestrians on the bridge to enhance their experience and safety. Use anti-graffiti designs in the program area and incorporate new technology as it is developed. Explore mitigation strategies to reduce highway noise for pedestrians, cyclists, local businesses, residents, and all bridge users. Use material options that are sustainable and environmentally friendly, balancing decisions to use low carbon materials, costs, and the life of materials into the program design, including local elements. Examples could include ash or shells, and then also consideration towards emissions. Next slide, please. Continuing in this category, we have create green spaces throughout the program area and use native plants to enhance ecological benefits. Connect to the local community within the program area, including Evergreen Boulevard, Hayden Island, Marine Drive, and the waterfront. Define community connectors, the freeway lid, near Evergreen and the waterfront. Implement east-west connectivity and accessibility within the program area. Next slide, please. Coordinate and salvage existing bridge elements for public display. Integrate art and local history and culture into the bridge and program area designs at various scales to enhance its aesthetic appeal and the connection to the community, creating a distinct and iconic bridge. Consider design with an eye towards ice and other severe weather conditions. Include designs that honor the contributors to the program and the bridge construction, including designers and builders. Include accountability to ensure that various contractors are adhering to the aesthetic and design specifications to create a consistent design throughout the program area. Next slide, please. Rounding out our physical design category, we have consider where there is an opportunity for a welcome center that will include a curated display of the history of the region, approved materials, photo documentation of the existing bridge, salvage plaques from the existing bridge. Consider where there's an opportunity to explore a truck inspection facility. Next slide, please. Our next category is community benefits. This one it could be a little confusing, but it's really meant to capture those that don't fit quite well into the other categories. So here we have create riverfront public access points and provide recreational opportunities, communal and open space, including areas for fishing and hiking on both sides of the river where feasible. While this should be explored across the program area, there should be extra effort to provide access to the river on Hayden Island. This should include multimodal access points and connect to existing amenities. Explore partnership options with Metro regarding the Expo Center. Be sure to acknowledge, understand, and honor the significance of this location and honor the work already done to develop plans for this site. Transit-oriented development. Prioritize innovative developments on the land adjacent to the bridge with a focus on projects that promote accessible and affordable housing. Next slide, please. And finally, we have our avoid further harm category. So this includes established systems for continuous monitoring for noise, vibration, and air quality during and after program construction, ensuring that pre-construction conditions are measured to use as a baseline. Provide a publicly accessible community benefits dashboard showing progress on all community benefits proposals and projects. Require contractors to arrange off-street parking for their site employees where feasible and reasonable. Mitigate noise and dust impacts to homes and businesses prior to, during, and after construction. Limit closures of sidewalks, bike lanes, and bus lanes near construction sites to minimize impacts on non-motorized transit. Next slide, please. Work with highly impacted residents to determine mitigations during construction, such as the installation of sound and dustproof windows in a timely fashion before construction begins, and hotel vouchers during the noisiest or overnight operations if certain noise levels are exceeded, etc. Set up portable speed monitoring signs on adjacent neighborhood streets. Create a process to monitor volumes and speeds on local streets within the program area, and when warranted per local traffic code, install speed bumps or tables to address safety during construction. Establish challenging electric vehicle or low emissions requirements as part of contract documents. Explore opportunities for renewable diesel and incentives. Next slide, please. Thanks. Retrofit diesel construction vehicles or require the use of renewable diesel where feasible and reasonable to curb air pollution prior to the start of construction. Incentivize the installation of electric charging stations in the construction zone for contractor use to meet EV requirements. These charging stations are to be placed so that they may become convenient public facilities after construction is complete and ongoing operations and ownership is determined. Install electric lines in advance of the start of construction to avoid future disruption for charging stations. Next slide, please. And that wraps up our first batch, our first tranche of recommendations that the Community Benefits Advisory Group has put forward for the program to consider. And so now we have some discussion questions that we wanted to bring to the group. The first being, we'd love to get any input that you have on this first batch of recommendations. And then the next, as Shannon mentioned, we've done some asset mapping work with the local partner agencies and staff to identify potential assets, resources that could be considered to help with these community benefits. So we wanted to provide an opportunity if there were any others that folks wanted to bring to bear.
Looks like Council President Lynn Peterson had a question or comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to the committee for recognizing the recognition of the needs at Expo into the future and the importance of Metro to communities impacted throughout our history. I know that there's been discussion about some of the specifics of what that could look like. Could you give us some examples?
Thank you for that question. I think some of the specifics that have come up is to really allow Metro to lead. The committee acknowledged that there's members on the committee who have been really closely following or engaging in the work that Metro is doing. So ensuring that what you're doing around the redevelopment and ensuring that what you're doing around honoring the Japanese internment and the history of that area, that's really honored in whatever IBR's role, if any, becomes with that Metro facility. So the committee has been really insistent that if there's something to be done there, it really needs to be led, and that the community work that Metro has done should continue and be honored, and IBR comes alongside of that.
Awesome, thank you. I guess I'll just be more specific in what we've heard from community members on the project itself. In order to be able to get to some of those different ideas that have come up during the Expo for community members, it has ranged from a place to preserve the history, not necessarily a museum, but something more interactive than that. And also, in order to get to some of these greater needs that the community has for jobs and growing the utilization of that site for jobs, there's been some talk about park and ride, and basically we're partnering with TriMet on parking spaces and how to get that back for a public-private partnership that we will need to go into in order to actualize the Expo site, as well as the idea of a visitor center. So I guess I just want to get those on the record and have the committee toss those around and think about how those would help.
Thank you. We absolutely can do that.
Let's see, Curtis.
Thanks a lot. Hi, Shannon. Really appreciate the work here, Shannon and Emily. I would just note we recently had some experience on trying to save as much of an existing structure as possible. And I would just say, oftentimes that gets in the way of the savings, the efficiency of the project construction. At the front end, you think you might be able to save some things where it's better actually just to get them off the site and recycled in some way. And so I would just say, to the extent possible, I'd recommend that conceptual idea of conservation and recycling is there. And I just would urge the team not to get out in front of project decisions that really can be very expensive. So I would, I really appreciate the insight on affected communities and all those other things. This is just me in very recent reaction on what we thought would be a cool idea at PDX to save a chunk of the existing infrastructure is simply not practical when you get into a nuts and bolts of making a project work. So I just wanted to, I guess, I hate it when people say this, get that on the record so that later folks say, right, let's keep it conceptual until the project team can work through what can actually be saved. Appreciate the consideration.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for that, Curtis.
Any other questions, comments for Shannon and Emily? So that was a lot of information. Thank you for sharing. Is there an opportunity if, as ESG members, have some other thoughts to answer your questions to contact you? Is there a period of time that you'd like them to do that, Shannon?
Absolutely. I think over the next week, if additional thoughts come up, please feel free to reach out to Emily and I, or you can just email directly to CBAG email, and we can make sure that all of that's a part in your follow-up materials. And additionally, I just want to thank Mayor Ann and Commissioner Mapps for their ongoing work and dedication to the CBAG. It's been a lot of work, additional work on top of what you're all already doing on a day-to-day. So just appreciate you showing up and really representing ESG in that space as well.
Thank you, Shannon and Emily. Any other questions or comments before we move on? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to public comment. Okay, next slide. So this is for ESG comment instructions. So to make a verbal comment, if you're in attendance right now, if you've joined by Zoom, click your raise hand button or down at the bottom there. And if you're on the phone, press *9 to raise your hand. I'll call on participants and you'll receive an unmute request. So please accept that. If you're commenting by phone, dial *6 to unmute. Please provide your name and affiliation. Attendees will be allocated up to 2 minutes for public comment, depending on the number of comments, or a total of 10 minutes. We'll also have a countdown on screen. If we run out of time and you have not had a chance to speak, you can still provide comments after the meeting. All right. Next slide. Do we want to go to that one? Comment instructions? Yeah, here it is. So again, a reminder is this is for comments to the ESG. If you want to provide comments on the draft SEIS, please go to this website there in www.interstatebridge.org/draft SEIS for official public comment on that. And again, to submit comments to the ESG after the meeting, we have a comment form on the program website, or you may email your comments to info@interstatebridge.org with ESG public comment in the subject line. We also have a toll-free line, 888-503-6735, and state ESG public comment in your message. All written comments must be received prior to 48 hours in advance of each upcoming meeting in order to be distributed to ESG members. Comments received after that point will be distributed to members in advance of their next meeting. All comments are posted on the IBR website. So with that, we'll open up for any comments. We have some folks in our attendee here on Zoom. Please raise your hand if you'd like to address the ESG group.
It looks like we don't have any public comment at this time.
Does not look like it. So, so we'll move on, and I will hand it back to Greg to talk about next steps.
All right, if we can pull up the slide, please. So once again, our draft supplemental environmental impact statement public comment period closes on November 18th. And the team will be tremendously busy. We're currently compiling all of the comments that have come in thus far. We have been The comment period has been open for approximately a month now. And we have between the last I've heard, we have between 700 and 1,000 comments thus far and are anticipating a great deal more. So once again, after November 18th, we will be taking all of those comments into account. We will be meeting with the ESG partners as well as our federal partners to start talking about what we want to move forward for a preferred alternative to take into the final supplemental environmental impact statement. We have a schedule that we are still furiously seeking to maintain. So we will be probably meeting individually with folks to get their input and craft what this alternative will look like. So that we will take into the final. We are have commitment from our federal partners to seek to get a final SEIS towards the end of the summer and a subsequent record of decision around this time next year. So the project is moving forward. But once again, the comments that we get, we will review and answer all of those, and those both comments and the program's answers will appear in that final supplemental document to be published next year. So I think that is our last slide, and we'll take any questions or comments that folks have before we wrap up. We're actually running about a half hour early. So Anita, I'm not seeing any questions unless you're seeing some.
Don't see any. So thanks everybody for your participation. We will end early since we didn't have any public comment. Thanks to the IBR team for all the great information. And we're looking forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thank you all.